The morning air was heavy and cold when I left our small apartment. The street smelled of smoke and garbage. I could hear a baby crying in another building. My hands were shaking as I pulled my coat tighter around me. I did not have breakfast. I never did on work days. The kitchen was empty and the gas stove had stopped working again. Mama was sleeping in the other room. She had worked late cleaning offices downtown. I could hear her slow breathing through the thin wall. I wanted to wake her, but I did not. She needed the rest more than I needed her words. Our home was 1 room and a half. The window was cracked, and the winter wind came through the glass. The floorboards made a sound when I walked, and every sound felt like a small reminder of what we did not have. Still, I told myself to keep walking. That was my rule for life. When you stop, fear catches you. I worked for a white family near the park. They paid me by the week. My job was to clean their house, wash their clothes, and help their daughter with small things. It was not a bad job, but I always felt like I did not belong there. The woman of the house spoke to me like I was a child. Her words were soft, but they were full of distance. Sometimes she smiled at me when her husband was home, and sometimes she looked through me when she thought no one was watching. I was used to it. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, invisible. That morning, the city was gray. The snow was still on the ground from the night before. I walked to the train and tried not to think too much. I was 21, but I felt older. Life had already taken the soft part of me and replaced it with something harder. I did not dream anymore. I worked, slept, and tried to stay out of trouble. Trouble was easy to find where I lived. When I reached the big house, I stopped for a second. The gate was made of iron, and my face looked strange in its reflection. I saw my tired eyes and the lines near my mouth. I used to think I was pretty once. Now, I only thought about how to survive. I rang the bell, and a man opened the door. It was Mr. Dalton, my employer. His eyes were small and kind, but he always looked nervous around me. He told me his daughter Mary was upstairs, waiting for breakfast. Mary Dalton was young, about my age, maybe a little younger. She was full of energy, full of questions, full of ideas about people like me. Sometimes she tried to talk to me like a friend. She asked about where I lived, what I dreamed of, who I loved. I never knew how to answer. I smiled and changed the subject. She had a way of speaking that made me uncomfortable. I could feel that she wanted to help me, but she did not understand me. She lived in a world that never touched mine. That morning, she wanted to go out, even though it was freezing. She said she was meeting a friend. I did not know it then, but that decision would change my life forever. She told me to come with her, to carry her things, to help her get a taxi. I followed her through the snow, my shoes wet, my hands cold. When we reached the car, her friend was already there. He was a young man named Jan. I knew his type. He liked to talk about change, about freedom, about how everyone should be equal. But when he looked at me, he did not see me as equal. He saw a story, a lesson, not a person. They talked and laughed as we drove through the city. I tried to stay quiet. Their words were like light snow falling around me, cold and soft, but never touching the ground. They went to a restaurant first. I waited outside. Later, when it got dark, we returned to the house. They had been drinking. Mary was laughing, and Jan was trying to say goodbye. I carried her up to her room because she could not walk straight. Her parents were asleep, and the house was quiet. When I reached her door, I felt the fear in my chest for the first time that night. I had never been in her room before. It was large, warm, and filled with soft colors. I put her down on the bed and turned to leave. But she moved suddenly and grabbed my arm. Her face was close to mine, her breath full of wine. She whispered something I could not understand. My heart was beating fast. I told her to rest, but she held my sleeve. I felt trapped in that moment, like a small animal caught in a light. Then I heard a sound outside the room. Footsteps. Heavy, slow. Her father. I froze. If he saw me there, in his daughter's room, everything would be over. I knew what he would think. I knew what they always thought. I whispered to her to be quiet, but she laughed softly. I panicked. I covered her face with a pillow just to stop the sound. I did not mean to hurt her. I only wanted silence. The footsteps came closer, then stopped. My hands were still pressing down. When I finally moved the pillow away, she was not moving. Her eyes were open, but they did not see me anymore. For a long moment, I did not breathe. I waited for her to wake up, to sit up, to say my name. But she did not. The house was silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the hall. Fear filled my whole body. I had killed her. I could not believe it. My hands were shaking so much that I could not stand. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I looked at her again, hoping I was wrong, but her skin was already pale. I had no plan. I only knew I had to hide what I had done. I told myself it was an accident, but my mind was full of pictures of what would happen if they found out. The police would not listen to me. The newspapers would call me a monster. The city would hate me. I looked around the room for a way out. Then I saw the furnace in the small basement room below the stairs. The thought came like lightning. I told myself it was only to hide her, not to destroy her. I told myself I had no choice. I carried her down, step by step, feeling her weight in my arms. My body was shaking. I could smell the coal and smoke from the furnace. The heat burned my face. I did not look at her again. I placed her inside and closed the door. My hands were black with soot. I told myself again and again that it was not my fault, that it was fear, not hate, that had made me do it. When it was over, I went back to my room in the small servant space at the back of the house. I sat on the bed, staring at my hands. They looked like they belonged to someone else. My heart was beating so loudly that I thought it would break my ribs. I wanted to sleep, but I could not. Every sound in the house made me jump. I thought about Mama, about how she used to tell me to pray when I was afraid. But I did not pray that night. I felt too far from everything holy. In the morning, the city looked the same, but nothing inside me was the same. I washed my hands again and again, but I could still feel the weight of what I had done. When Mr. Dalton asked where his daughter was, I said she was still sleeping. He smiled, not knowing that the truth was already burning below his feet. I walked through the house, doing my work as if nothing had happened. Every corner felt alive with fear. The walls seemed to watch me. I told myself to stay calm, to keep moving, to pretend. But deep inside, I knew the truth was waiting. It would come for me sooner or later. I had tried to escape my fate, but maybe fate had never left me. It had followed me all my life, silent and patient, waiting for this moment. And now, it had found me. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. The morning after Mary's death, I woke before sunrise. The house was still. I sat on my small bed with my hands pressed together. My heart felt like a heavy stone inside my chest. I could hear the wind outside and the soft sound of pipes in the wall. Every little sound made me afraid. I waited for someone to knock on my door and ask questions, but nobody came. The world continued like nothing had happened. I dressed carefully, putting on clean clothes as if it could make me innocent again. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a stranger. My eyes were darker, my face thinner. I kept telling myself that it was an accident, that I did not mean to hurt her. But another voice whispered that it did not matter. No one would believe me. In their eyes, I would always be guilty before I spoke a single word. When I went to the kitchen, the cook was already there. She smiled at me and asked if I could help with breakfast. Her voice sounded normal, kind even. I tried to act normal too. I took the plates, cleaned the counter, and brought the coffee upstairs. I walked past Mary's door and stopped for a second. The smell of smoke from the basement was still in my hair, but I told myself that it was nothing. My hands shook, so I held the tray tighter and kept walking. Mr. Dalton was reading his newspaper in the dining room. He asked if his daughter had returned late the night before. I said I did not know. My voice sounded calm, but inside I was burning. He nodded and said maybe she stayed with a friend. I wanted to run out of the room. My throat was dry and my body felt weak. Somehow, I kept moving through the day. Every hour felt like a year. When I returned home that evening, Mama was sitting near the window. She asked why I looked so tired. I wanted to tell her everything, but I could not. I told her work had been hard, and she smiled and said she was proud of me. Her words cut through me. I had never wanted to make her proud more than in that moment, and yet I had never deserved it less. I went to bed early, but I could not sleep. I could see Mary's face in the dark, the way her eyes had looked before they turned still. The next few days passed like a dream I could not wake from. People in the house began to whisper. They said Mary had not returned home. The police came to ask questions. I told them the same story again and again. I said she left with her friend that night, and I did not see her again. They wrote down my words, but I could tell they did not believe me completely. I tried to keep my face calm. Every time someone looked at me, I wondered if they could see the truth inside my eyes. That evening, I went to the basement again. I stood in front of the furnace and listened to its low sound. The room was hot and dark. The air smelled of coal. I felt sick. I wanted to open the door and look, but I was afraid. I told myself not to think about it. I told myself that if I stayed quiet, if I worked hard and said nothing, the world might forget. But the world never forgets the truth. It only waits. The newspapers started talking about the missing girl. Her picture was everywhere. I saw her face on the front page one morning while cleaning the Daltons' living room. The paper said she was last seen leaving home with her friend. They offered money for anyone with information. I felt my heart stop when I read the words. I wanted to tear the paper into pieces, but I could not. I placed it back on the table and walked away slowly. Everywhere I went, I could feel the eyes of the city. On the train, in the market, in the streets. People talked about the missing girl. They talked about danger, crime, and who was to blame. I heard their words, and every sentence felt like it was meant for me. At night, I lay in bed, shaking. I wanted to confess, but fear held me by the throat. I thought of Mama again. If I was gone, she would have no one. I told myself I had to survive for her. One night, I dreamt that Mary was standing at the end of my bed. She looked at me with empty eyes. Her lips moved, but no sound came. I woke up sweating, gasping for air. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might die. I sat up and pressed my hands to my chest. I wanted to believe it was only a dream, but it felt real. I went to the small window and looked outside. The city lights were far away, and everything seemed cold and endless. I thought of running away, of taking the train and disappearing. But where would I go? Poverty follows you like a shadow. You cannot leave it behind. The next morning, the police came again. This time they brought a detective. He had sharp eyes and a calm voice. He asked more questions. He asked what time Mary went out, who was with her, and if I saw her after that. My mouth answered, but my mind was far away. I could see myself from outside my body, sitting in that chair, lying to survive. When they left, I fell to the floor and cried. My tears were black with dust from the basement. Days turned into weeks. I lived each day waiting for the sound of footsteps coming for me. I could not eat. I could not laugh. I started to see things that were not there. Once, I thought I saw smoke rising from my hands. Another time, I thought I heard Mary's voice in the hall. The guilt grew inside me like a living thing. It ate my sleep, my hunger, my hope, Then, one cold morning, everything ended. The police returned with more men. They said they found something in the furnace. I could see it in their faces before they spoke the words. They had found her. My legs gave way beneath me. I did not fight when they took my arms and led me out of the house. The city outside was bright, but I could not see it clearly. People had gathered in the street. They shouted words I could not hear. The sound was far away, like the sea inside my head. At the station, they put me in a small room. The walls were gray, the air heavy. They asked me again and again why I did it. I said I did not mean to. I said it was an accident. But their eyes told me that nothing I said would matter. They had already decided who I was. To them, I was not a person who made a mistake. I was a symbol of everything they feared. I thought of Mama again. She would be at home, waiting for me, not knowing that her daughter's face would soon be on every newspaper. I imagined her opening the door to strangers, her eyes wide with confusion. I wanted to tell her that I was sorry, that I never wanted any of this. But there were no words left strong enough to carry the truth. That night in the cell, I sat on the cold floor. The window was small, and the light came in weakly. I thought about fate, about how it had followed me since I was a child. Every choice I made felt like a step along a road already built for me. I remembered the first time I was afraid as a little girl, hiding from a group of boys who laughed at me because of where I lived. I remembered Mama's hands, rough and tired, washing clothes until they bled. I remembered the sound of the train passing every night and how I dreamed of being on it. Now, sitting there, I realized something I had never understood before. I had tried all my life to run from fear, but fear had been the only thing that kept me alive. It had guided every move I made, every lie I told, every silence I held. I had never been free. Maybe none of us were. The night was long, and the sounds of the city faded away. Somewhere far off, a bell rang. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself that I was still here, still breathing. For the first time in days, I felt a small kind of peace. The truth was out now. The hiding was over. I did not know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I could not escape my fate anymore. It had caught me, and in its cold hands, I finally stopped running. The days in the cell began to blend together. Morning and night felt almost the same. The walls were gray, the floor was cold, and the air smelled of old iron. At first, I counted the hours, hoping someone would come and tell me it was all a mistake. But nobody came with good news. The world outside continued to move while I sat still in the dark. Time became something heavy that I carried inside my head. They gave me food twice a day, but I could not eat much. The bread was dry and the soup was thin, but it was not the taste that stopped me. It was the thought that each bite might be my last. Sometimes, I stared at the wall and imagined Mama's kitchen, where she used to cook rice and beans. I could almost smell it if I closed my eyes. I wanted to see her again, to tell her that I still loved her, but I knew she would only see shame when she looked at me now. The guards did not speak much to me. They looked at me like I was something less than human. Their faces were hard and their eyes tired. One of them was younger than the others. Sometimes he watched me quietly when he brought water. Once, he dropped a small piece of paper with a prayer written on it. I read it slowly, even though my hands were shaking. It said, "Forgive yourself. God already knows." I did not know if I believed it, but I kept the paper under my blanket. When the trial began, they took me from the cell and led me into a large courtroom. The air smelled of perfume and old wood. I had never been in a place like that before. The benches were full of people, and I could feel their eyes on me. Some looked angry, some looked curious, and a few looked sorry. But none of them knew me. To them, I was only a story printed in black ink. The man who stood beside me said he was my lawyer. He spoke to the court about my hard life, about the poverty and fear that shaped me. But his words sounded far away, like the wind outside the window. I watched the faces of the people sitting near the front. They were the Daltons, Mary's parents. Mrs. Dalton's eyes were red, and Mr. Dalton stared at the floor. Seeing them hurt more than the chains around my wrists. I wanted to tell them the truth. I wanted to say that I never meant to harm her. But my mouth could not open. Every word felt trapped behind my teeth. When the judge spoke, his voice was clear and cold. He said I had taken a life. He said there was no excuse. I listened without moving. I already knew what he would say. They decided that I would die. The courtroom became quiet for a moment. I heard someone cry, and then the sound of footsteps as people left. My lawyer touched my shoulder gently, but I did not look at him. I stared straight ahead, my heart calm for the first time in many days. Fate had spoken, and I had nothing left to hide. Back in my cell, I sat for a long time without thinking. I expected to feel fear, but instead, I felt something close to peace. Maybe it was because I finally knew the end. For so long, I had lived in fear of what might happen. Now there was no might. There was only what would be. The waiting became easier once I accepted that. The newspapers wrote about me every day. The guards sometimes brought them into the cell. I saw my own face on the front page, under headlines filled with anger and blame. They called me a monster, a criminal, a heartless girl. I looked at those words and wondered if that was who I had become. Maybe they were right. Maybe the world only remembers what you do, not why you did it. But at night, when everything was quiet, I thought of Mary. I saw her face again, not in anger, but in sadness. I remembered her laughter that night, her soft words, her careless joy. I tried to remember her as alive, not as the still face in the dark. I told her I was sorry. I whispered it into the air, hoping it might reach wherever she was now. I did not know if she could hear me, but saying it made my heart feel lighter. Weeks passed, and the sound of the world faded away. The noise of the guards, the voices of the other prisoners, even the sound of footsteps, all became part of the same endless rhythm. I began to look for small things to hold on to. The light from the small window in the morning, the pattern of cracks on the wall, the sound of rain when it fell on the roof. These small things became my world. They reminded me that even in this place, life continued. One morning, a woman came to visit. She said she was a teacher from the city. She wanted to talk about faith and forgiveness. At first, I did not answer her questions. I thought she was like the others, trying to study me. But she spoke with calm eyes and a quiet voice. She did not ask what I had done. She asked what I remembered about my childhood. I told her about Mama, about the small church near our home, and about how I used to sing when I was a little girl. Her eyes softened when I spoke. She told me that sometimes pain makes us forget who we are, but it can also help us see the truth. After she left, I thought about her words for a long time. Maybe the truth was not only about what I did to Mary. Maybe it was also about the world that had shaped both of us. We were both young, both trapped in different ways. She by her comfort and blindness, and I by my fear and poverty. I wondered if things could have been different if either of us had truly seen the other. The night before they were going to take me away, I could not sleep. The air felt heavy, and the moonlight came through the bars like a cold hand on my face. I thought again about freedom. All my life, I believed freedom meant money, a bigger home, a better job. But now I understood that freedom was something smaller and deeper. It was the space inside you where no one else can reach. The place where you decide what kind of person you will be. I took out the small paper with the prayer and read it again. I whispered the words until they became part of my breath. Forgive yourself. God already knows. I tried to forgive myself, not for what I had done, but for the fear that had guided me. I forgave the world for the things it never gave me. I forgave Mary for being born into a life I could only see from a distance. Forgiveness did not change my fate, but it made my heart less heavy. When the sun rose, the sky was pale and quiet. I heard the guards walking toward my cell. My hands were cold, but my mind was calm. I thought about Mama again. I hoped she would remember me as the girl who used to sing by the window, not as the one in the newspaper. I wanted her to know that I was not afraid anymore. They opened the door and I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but I did not fall. The young guard was there again, the one who had given me the paper. His eyes were full of something like sorrow. He did not speak, and neither did I. The sound of my chains filled the hall as we walked. The world outside the window was bright, and for a moment I wanted to hold on to that light. When they stopped, I closed my eyes and took a breath. I thought of the train I used to hear at night when I was little. I imagined it waiting for me again, ready to take me somewhere far beyond fear. Maybe that was what freedom truly was. Not running away, but letting go. In those last seconds, I was not thinking about death. I was thinking about all the things I had been too afraid to say when I was alive. I thought about the people who never looked at me, the ones who saw me only through glass. I hoped that one day someone would tell my story not as a crime, but as a warning about what happens when the world forgets to see the people who live in its shadows. My heart was steady, and I was no longer afraid. Fate had caught me, but in that final moment, I caught something too. I caught a piece of peace, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.